Good evening, everybody. I hope you're well. I have muted you all so you can hear my dulcet tones this evening. A bit of a change. You've got me hosting tonight as young Mr. Mark House is on a train, so looking very much like Bane out of Batman. Mark, give a wave to everybody if you can see yourself. Welcome. Tonight we already have over 420 people into the event. So what a fantastic night we're in for. And what an amazing lady to talk to you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Just a few rules in the house tonight. We would ask that you remain on mute so everybody can hear the speaker. That would be fantastic. We have got our team, our committee, who are working very hard behind the scenes so that we can obviously monitor all the transmission of tonight and make sure that anybody who's had a few too many gins gets muted so we don't hear too much laughter from your side. But what we'd like to do is obviously crack on with the evening. There are still people coming in. But for the evening, we're going to hear very shortly from President Peter, and he's going to give a few words of wisdom to us all tonight. And then to Don Mullane, who's going to give us a bit of a quick update of events for the next few weeks. And then I have the pleasure of kind of introducing Amanda. So if we're all ready and sit back, enjoy, and there will be some questions for later on. And what I would say is that if you could put the questions into the chat, I will be monitoring that with the team. And then after Amanda has done her marvelous speaking piece, that we'll have a questions and answers bit at the very end. So on that note, President Peter, welcome. Over to you, my friend.
Thanks very much, Marcus. As you know, Marcus is in charge tonight, so there'll be a bit more verbal stuff than what Mark normally gives us. But Mark's on the train somewhere. He would always keep popping up now and then. It's great to see you all here. These Connects evenings really are getting more and more every week now. We're up to 445 now, which is fantastic. And as Marcus said, we've got a great...
my laptop, that's wrong.
Who the hell's that? We've got a great night lined up for you. We've just been talking a bit to Amanda while she's been getting glammed up doing her nails. So she's looking very posh for tonight. Before we do start over with Amanda, though, I'd just like to hand over to Don now, who will give the announcements for the up-and-coming events for the next couple of weeks or so. Don, thank you. Where's he gone? Well, he was here.
Is he on mute?
Unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was unmuted. Someone decided to mute me. There we go.
That's a fine.
Everyone's at multiple requests, guys. We've sent out details of the forthcoming speeches all the way up to what will be our first virtual AGM. And next week we've got Christo Brand, who's Nelson Mandela's warder for 18 years in prison, will be our guest speaker. The following week we're going to have the chairman of the Rugby League World Cup 2021 in England. Now, if you can imagine to be in his shoes, he was appointed to the position in June 2019, and then everything happened subsequently, as they say. Just to bring you up to speed as well, we've got the 41 Club Whisky Appreciation Group are having their first whisky tasting virtually tomorrow evening. We've got a new 41 Club Wine group set up on the Facebook groups. So if you're on Facebook and you like wine, and I can't see that rules out too many of you here tonight, please join it and find out more. And the last event I was going to mention tonight was there's a Ladies Circle fundraiser this Friday as well, tomorrow. Details of it were sent out on the email. It's a special magic evening. And if you're interested in going to it, please read the email again. It's towards the bottom of it. And bookings for that close at 5 p.m. tomorrow. And it's at 7 o'clock or 7:30. So without further ado, over to Marcus to introduce tonight's speaker. Marcus.
Thank you, Don. And let me just unspotlight you, my friend. Thank you. Good technology. And I'll just add the spotlight on Amanda, and then I'll disappear and leave it all to Amanda. I had the pleasure of meeting Amanda for the first time yesterday. And the one thing I've learned straight away is that she likes Baileys. That's obviously a drink, a tipple in it, Amanda, that you like to have.
In a cup.
In a cup.
Yep. Marcus, I've muted you.
I'm just going to brighten up a bit.
It was interesting that reading up about you, Amanda, and I've watched your TV programs, and I think I picked up yesterday that you've been busy recording another one recently. Number 3 in the book chart. You'd come off a call with WI yesterday, doing a great speaker call for them yesterday. And I think the thing I come out of it, and with all of your energy, was how much of a busy lady you are with the family as well. But I don't want to take any more from that and let you tell your story. Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you very much. Let's see if I can get the tech to work for a start. Here we go. Now then, hopefully, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the pictures on the screen? I'm hoping so. Yeah, we're going. Well, I'd like to say for a start, good evening to you all, ladies and gentlemen. And for those of you that don't know anything about me, a vague rundown. I live with my husband, Clive, and 9 children. What is built as one of the highest, remotest hill farms in England. I am first and foremost a hill shepherdess. I chase and wrestle with sheep, run dogs, ride horses, tussle with cows, wall gaps, and even sometimes do all that the other way around. Chase dogs and horses, tussle with sheep, and wrestle with Clive. I also, in my spare time, have written a few books about life on the farm. But with any story, it's always best to start at the beginning. Now, we get a fair few visitors to our farm throughout the summer months. And one of the most frequently asked questions we get is, has this farm been in your family for generations? Now, the answer to this is no. Both my husband and I are first generation farmers. He being from Doncaster and I from Huddersfield. So both Yorkshire born and bred, but now residing in a very different part of our expansive county. It was in 1996 that I first visited Ravensey and met Clive, who was living a relatively solitary existence there. Who'd have thought that over 20 years later, this quiet little backwater would now be bursting at the seams with children and life. Ravensey has always been considered to be off the beaten track. Indeed, the very top of Swaledale was written about in history as being occupied by heathens and wild folk. So maybe not a lot has changed there then. I'm the daughter of a model and a mechanic, and I'll let you guys decide which was which. I had a typically ordinary suburban upbringing, quite uneventful really. I coasted through my formative years. I was neither a shrinking violet nor a hellraiser. If anything, I was maybe just a little directionless. Now, there was one thing that I was very passionate about, and that was books. From an early age, I'd been an avid reader and collector, and I'd amassed quite a collection. Huddersfield was a brilliant place to buy second-hand, vintage, and antiquarian books. But it was my grandfather that recommended that I should read a James Herriot book and handed me a copy of If Only They Could Talk. I loved that book. I read it from cover to cover and was absolutely delighted when a television series based on the books, All Creatures Great and Small, aired. I'd tune in every Sunday to follow the trials and tribulations of the vets and marvel at the scenery. I've never been a big fan of watching TV. I much preferred getting out and about on my bicycle. And in many respects, the suburb of Huddersfield in which I lived was good, in that I could be in the hubbub and busyness of the town centre in a matter of minutes, but also out on the moors of Meltham and Home Firth in roughly the same time. I'd often take off on my own, pedalling frantically and usually uphill, but not really heading for any given place, just to quiet spots where only heather grew and sheep roamed. From here, I'd survey the landscape, houses, factories and mills in the valleys away in the distance and daydream. Now, nearing the end of my schooling, the question still loomed about future careers. And I had by now decided that I wanted to enter the veterinary profession. But I didn't just want to spend my day vaccinating puppies and gelding cats. I wanted to be a farm vet, just like my hero, Harriet. I broke the news to my careers advisor at school, and he was sceptical and not as encouraging as he might have been. He pointed out, quite rightly, that it was a very competitive area that required dedication and academic excellence. He pointed out that realistically, I wasn't up to the mark and that I needed to think again. I stubbornly stuck with my dream. I was now even more determined and on a mission to prove him and the other doubters wrong. I combed the bookshops, more focused on what I now needed to find. Books on large animals, horses, cattle, sheep, and agriculture in general. The Madonna and Aha posters that adorn the bedroom walls were now replaced with homemade annotated diagrams of dissected sheep and cows. One day, I was perusing the shelves of Huddersfield Central Library and I discovered a book. It was one that would change the course of my whole life. Unusually, the book was brand new, and even more unusual was that it was a coffee table style book. The title was Hill Shepherd, and it consisted of enigmatic photographs of modern day shepherds going about their business, gathering the moors and fells, foddering the flocks in a bit of cold and snow, and even skinning a dead lamb. This book was different in that it was not quintessentially beautiful, just very real and gritty. And the hardships encountered not glossed over. It made me realise that the people, the lifestyle and the landscape that I'd seen on the All Creatures Great and Small series still existed. And in that instant, I made up my mind that I wanted to be a hill shepherd. From that day on, it was all that I focused on. How was I going to become that person standing on a mountaintop with a whistle in my mouth and a flock in the distance? I can't say that my careers advisor was unsupportive of my new idea. He just raised his eyebrows and scribbled GFW, General Farm Worker, in my end of school report. My parents were similarly unimpressed, but reckoned it was perhaps just a phase that I was going through, and I'd come to my senses eventually. Now, the nearest that I could get to any kind of formal training was a part-time animal care course at the local technical college. Realistically, I knew that if I was going to have to start at the very bottom if I was ever going to realise my dream, and that I needed to get myself a job to earn some money, get a car and get myself mobile, as Huddersfield weren't a hotbed of opportunity for a wannabe shepherdess. I worked in a sweet shop, a high-class china shop, nights in a factory putting badges on birthday cards or rolling sheets of wrapping paper onto cardboard tubes. For a while, I even operated the incinerator at Huddersfield Royal Infirmary. Inspiring it wasn't, but it just spurred me on and made me even more determined to get my foot on the ladder. I managed to get some work experience on a few farms around Huddersfield. I helped at lambing time on a sheep farm and milked cows for a while too. I learned some basics, how to drive a tractor, how to grease up a combine harvester, and most useful of all, how to use a shovel. I began to scour the classified adverts in the Farmers Weekly and soon spotted a position that looked like it'd suit me. Shepherd wanted on Salisbury Plain. Living, no sheepdog required. Well, I was hardly the ideal candidate, still a teenager with just the vaguest of ideas, but I had a great deal of enthusiasm and a few textbook theories to fall back on. So regardless of my shortcomings, I somehow managed to bluff my way into the job. I got the distinct feeling that my employer was perhaps a little on the desperate side, but that didn't matter. I was finally on the road to becoming a shepherdess. It was the first time that I'd been away from home, and I didn't like it very much. I wasn't necessarily homesick. I just couldn't settle on the flat, featureless plains of Wiltshire. The land was rented off the MOD. It was used for military training, so there were no permanent boundaries. I spent a vast majority of my time assembling disassembling and unraveling electric fence wire. I didn't stay down south for long. At the first opportunity, I went north, heeding the advice of some farmers that I'd met whilst they were visiting their hogs that were wintering nearby. I was told in no uncertain terms that I should head for Cumbria to proper sheep country and learn about proper shepherding. Even better news was that one of the chaps knew of a job in his area. Looking back now, it all seems a bit mad that I should have considered living in the world's worst caravan in a farmyard as being in any way called progression. With no running water, a profusion of brown and beige and a very dodgy gas bottle, I soon began to look as run down as a caravan and styled my hair into dreadlocks on account of the lack of washing facilities. I not only bore more than a passing resemblance to Swampy the eco-warrior, I think I smelt like him and all. But you know what? I absolutely loved my newfound job. It was everything that I dreamed of. And although still a little green, I was a quick learner. And my mentor had a great deal of patience and a sense of humour. For the first time in my life, I felt quite settled and happy. And I developed a newfound confidence amongst the stock. When my employer asked whether I'd be interested in renting one of his small cottages in a nearby village, I jumped at the chance. Now, this wasn't an easy time. I lived hand to mouth for a while. There's a tendency to look back on these times with rose-tinted glasses. A time of youthfulness, freedom, energy, and enthusiasm. But the reality is that life was sometimes a struggle. As I got busier and busier, and as I became more proficient at my work, it became evident that I was going to have to up my game and get a sheepdog. Emphasis here must be on a working sheepdog, because I'd acquired a pup whilst I was on a farm on the outskirts of Penrith. I'd admired the farmer's bearded collie bitch from afar whilst we were gathering the bracken-thick fells, but only when we got back into the pens in the farmyard was I shown her litter of pups. All of the pups were already spoken for, or should I say most of them were. I was soon pointed in the direction of a wiry-coated, mismatched pup that looked suspiciously like it had some terrier in it. That one hadn't been claimed, and it was mine if I wanted it. That was it, the deal was done. Well, for a good while, I'd managed to shepherd Sam's dog. I sometimes even felt that I was used as a substitute for a sheepdog. I certainly responded to the whistles, shouts, and arm waving of farmers and other shepherds, and spent a lot of time hard on the heels of sheep. I would have liked to have given her one of the classic sheepdog names, Fly, Nip, Tan, or Merc, but I was a little worried as to whether she could ever live up to such a name, so I erred on the side of caution and called her Deefa dog. She certainly looked the part, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but that was, unfortunately, where it ended. She was loyal, would follow me anywhere, but never once did she set off around the sheep. But it was during one particularly trying day that I was carrying a lamb down a lakeland hillside whilst running hither and thither, driving the flock home, that I sat down in the pouring rain and I begged Deefa to show willing and help me out. For some inexplicable reason, the penny dropped and she set off at lightning speed around the sheep. From then on, we never looked back. Sheepdog running was never to be my forte. It was all done with little style or panache, much gesticulating and even a touch of swearing, but we could now get a job done. Deefa and I were a pair and we could conquer anything. A little while later, I acquired another sheepdog with the equally unlikely name of Roger. Apologies to any Rogers that are out there, but I soon changed his name to Red on account of his beautiful red and white coat. I was given this gorgeous working collie due to the fact that it was particularly territorial and had a nasty habit of biting visitors to his owner's farm. He could sink his teeth into a feed rep's ankle and slink back into the shadows before the victim could turn and identify his assailant. As I moved from farm to farm, this wasn't a problem for me. So now I had two slightly dysfunctional, unhinged sheepdogs to my name, plus a whole host of waifs and strays that I picked up along the way. An unwanted goat, a few pet lambs, and eventually a pony. I learned as I went along, the essentials, how to wall and to clip. I even got a job working on an alpaca farm, learned how to clip them too, and ended up going to Twycross Zoo to work with the resident alpacas. I did quite a bit of relief milking amongst other things. At this point, there was still a number of small dairy farms with herds of 20 and 30 cows. And it was whilst I was working on one of these small dairy farms that I was sent on a mission to go and borrow a tup, a ram, a male sheep, just in case you don't know the lingo, to use on his small flock of Swaledale sheep. I've got a friend that knows a thing about Swales, he said, and he lends me a tup every year. Well, off I went after evening milking with just the vaguest of directions. I was to drive from Cumbria over the border back into Yorkshire, drive and drive over miles of moorland in the dark until I got to a road sign that said Ravensey only. Then I must drive down a narrow road for a mile or so, through a ford and up into the farmyard. His friend Clive would be expecting me. Never did I think that this chance meeting spelled the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life. I was immensely relieved when I parked up in Ravensey farmyard, although it has to be said there wasn't much to see. It was dark, the kind of inky blackness that you only get in the backwaters. I was greeted by Clive, the farmer in question, who took me across the yard to the loose box to catch the tup. The tup wasn't at all helpful and refused to be caught, but eventually we cornered him and frog marched him to the borrowed pickup and trailer. Tup, that is, not Clive. A quick cup of tea was partaken in the farmhouse before I set off back. The farmhouse was not in the best of states, it has to be said. It still isn't. It seemed that Clive lived there alone with just his prized Swaledale flock books and the bare minimum of anything else. He lived to farm, his life was outside. We made polite small talk, and then I headed back to civilization, never giving Clive or Ravensey a second thought. A few days had passed when I got a phone call from Clive. I didn't answer, but he was persistent, but not as much as I was stubborn. It was only when he decided to leave a message on my answer phone that I eventually talked to him. But it wasn't some hot date that persuaded me to venture back into the hills again, but a tale of woe that pulled at the heartstrings. It turned out he'd been gathering in his best sheep from the moor, and his very bestest yow had somehow broken her leg. He couldn't manage to hold the leg and set it. He needed me to come and help. I still to this day have no idea why I didn't call the vet or on Clifford, his nearest neighbouring farmer. So there we have it. I was lured to Ravensey by an ailing sheep. It was only when I returned to Ravensey that I got my first glimpse in the daylight of this beautifully bleak and austere place that I'd one day call my home. And by the way, that yow's leg never did set straight. The break was far too high. She lived out her days, tripping everyone up, taking folks' legs out from under them, with a front leg that stuck out at a 45-degree angle. I would tell the many people that had come to the front door and inform me of a three-legged sheep that was hopping about in Gath that she had a lot to answer for. It was 1996 that I came to the farm. It's one of the highest, remotest hill farms in England. Its land, all 2,000 acres, covers the very head of Swaledale and runs to Cumbria, the border of which is marked out by the 9 standards rig. At its lowest, the farmhouse sits at 1,350 foot above sea level, but the surrounding moors reach up to some 1,800 foot of the bleakest, windswept moorland imaginable. It is a hard place to live and work and is primarily a sheep farm, now running some 850 breeding sheep, a small herd of pedigree beef shorthorns, and more horses than I dare mention. So, in 2000, we decided to get married. Now, not wishing there to be too much in the way of formality, or probably expense, we decided that we would hold our reception and stag do at our very favourite place, Ravensey, of course. So any ideas of hiring fancy wedding marquees were dashed when we balked at the price. A solution was found in the form of our local show's striped beer tent. We married at Mucor in the July of 2000. I fully intended to ride to the church on my horse side saddle, but just as I was tacking up, the heavens opened and a summer deluge of immense intensity rained on my parade. I didn't have time to prize off the riding boots and took my vows still in them, though hidden beneath a beautiful golden Elizabethan-style wedding dress. This had been chosen solely for practical reasons, as I had a few calves that had been rearing on bucket, and I'd need to feed them at some point between the wedding service and the reception. I had no intention of getting changed, and calf slobber was much less likely to show up on a gold dress than a pure white one. There was an open invite to the wedding and reception, and the celebrations went on for 2 days. There were many guests, friends, acquaintances, and quite a few randoms. To the walkers who were on the coast-to-coast route, which cuts right through the farm, it must have seemed like a mirage on what actually ended up being a most glorious weekend. After trudging through 10 miles of bog, To find an oasis complete with a blue striped beer tent in the middle of the field must have seemed beyond comprehension. But what it did do was sow a little seed of thought in my head. As the walkers supped the pint in our wedding tent, I reckoned that maybe one day I should serve light refreshments to this passing trade. We spent a week after the wedding clipping the sheep and making hay, and not long after this, a baby was due. It was 2001, the year that foot and mouth decimated our farming communities, and in my wisdom, I decided that as I'd been tucked at Ravenseat, I'd likely have to lamb at Ravenseat. I'd spent much time attending calving cows and lambing sheep and watching nature firsthand. How hard could it be? The midwives were not happy. I was 2 hours away from the hospital, but eventually they reluctantly agreed that I could have a home birth. We soldiered on. Foot and mouth kept its distance, and just before our sheep became due, I too set off lambing. Early one morning, I woke up feeling a bit off colour. The midwife came out and told me the good news. I was only an hour off giving birth. Brilliant. Clive was carving a cow. She was getting on with it, he said. Dinner time came and there was still no baby. Clive was unimpressed. Do you know between carving aid through, he said. Well, Clive went backwards and forwards between cow and me. The calf arrived. I got more words of encouragement. What are you messing about at? Me calf's up, it's footed and it's sucked. Of course, the baby wasn't coming right. No, it wasn't going to come out. An ambulance was called, blues and twos, all the way to Northallerton. The ambulance rocked and rolled as it sped along the winding country roads. At the head end, the midwife was being travel sick in a cardboard kidney bowl. And at the other end, there was just no doing. I couldn't even have any pain relief en route as the jam baby couldn't be monitored. It really was not a good situation to be in. At Scotch Corner, we went round the roundabout heading to Northallerton. Clive, struggling to keep up in the Land Rover, just went north. Eventually, at 5 p.m, I had a caesarean section and a week was spent at the Friarage whilst my baby girl and I recovered. After an experience like that, you might think that any hopes of adding to our family would have been dashed, but that wasn't to be the case. Now, I'm not going to bore you with another 8 birth stories, blokes. 4 of which so far have been in lay-bys en route to the hospital. Babies might be made in lay-bys, but I feel that I've rather bucked the trend a bit by producing them there. West Witton, Reeth, Oxnop and Keld after only 2 cattle grids. And Catterick Garrison military out-of-hours surgery, where I had to beg a sentry with a machine gun to let me in the compound that morning. Only once have I actually made it to the hospital to give birth. But I think that I should share with you the events of the night of July the 3rd, 2015. I was by this time now known as a grand multi-gravida, as I was expecting my 8th baby. People, midwives and doctors included, would ask what exactly I had in place for a plan. I'd shrug and say what will be, will be. Mother Nature doesn't do plans. And what with the downgrading of the Friarage at Northallerton, the nearest hospital was now the James Cook at Middlesbrough, over 2.5-hour journey away. I wasn't happy about my options. It was a catch-22 situation, as I didn't qualify for a home birth either. I started to wonder about the possibility of free birthing. For me, it seemed like the perfect answer, but for it to happen, a lot of things had to fall into place. Number 1, it needed to be in the middle of the night when there was nobody around to interfere. Number 2, I needed a clear head to be brave and confident and prepared for any eventuality. I was fortunate that I had an excellent friend in the medical profession who gave me a realistic rundown of what to do, what not to do, how to deal with an issue, and when to call for help. It had been a busy few days on the farm. Hay time was looming. I had guests in the shepherd's hut, and my due date was still a few weeks away. I'd gone to bed feeling quite tired. I hadn't been able to sleep. Counting sheep doesn't work for me. I got up, made a cup of tea, stoked the fire quietly so not to wake up the family. I read the paper for a while, and still I couldn't sleep. I dozed for a while, but I felt just so unsettled. Got up again, tried to make myself comfortable, but I was just so restless. I paced backwards and forwards, and then it hit me. Well, I'm in labour. It might seem mad, quite unbelievable, I suppose, that I shouldn't know, but having been blessed with not having any contractions or outwardly obvious symptoms, it was just very similar to feeling out of sorts. Well, it was now or never. I could either ring the labour ward, they'd send an ambulance and a paramedic, and the next few hours would be fraught, absolute panic stations, or I could do no, grit my teeth and let nature take its course. I went for the latter. It wasn't much after midnight when on the hearth, in front of a blazing fire, My birth partner being a snoozing terrier, that I gave birth to a little baby girl, Clemmy. As I sat in the flickering firelight with my blinking newborn wrapped in towels, I decided that perhaps it was now time to wake Clive up. I crept up the stairs, clutching the baby tightly. Clive, I said, wake up. He was snoring and he's a bit deaf. Clive, I said, wake up. I upped the volume a notch. I've had the baby. He sat up, bolt upright, and he said something quite unrepeatable, but it was a general exclamation of surprise. "You're some woman there," he said, shaking his head as he peeped amongst the towels. It was the next day that there was a knock at the farmhouse door. 2 walkers requesting refreshments. I explained that scones were definitely off the menu as I hadn't baked owing to giving birth the previous day. But if they wanted tea, then they were most welcome. Of course, it turned out that our impromptu visitors were a GP and an obstetrician. "Typical," said Clive, "they're like bloody buses, none around when you want one and then 2 when you don't." I've never felt intimidated by having a whole squadron of children in tow. Anything is possible with just a little thought and organisation. But as time went on and our family grew, the older ones would help out with the little ones. I believe that it's important that the children feel that they are an integral part of the running of the farm and that they take on certain responsibilities from a very young age. Whether it be helping out by bringing in fire kindling, filling the wood box, or making paper dogs, or going to one of the outlying barns to feed the hens and collect the eggs. I like to see them busy rather than sitting in front of the TV for long spells. I prefer to see them disappear over the horizon on ponies than playing on the computer. There is always a wealth of things to do on a farm. Now, you'll remember perhaps that we served drinks to passing walkers on our wedding day, and it had always been my intention to set up a little sideline providing the most basic of services for the coast-to-coast walkers, of which there seemed to be an ever-increasing amount. Actually, on average, 16,000 walkers will pass through our farm every year. And I figured that if I could extract just £1 out of each and every one of them, then it'd be a worthwhile venture, cheap and cheerful with basic shelter from the elements. Somewhere a tired, cold and wet walker could sit, have a brew and commiserate with his fellow walkers and apportion blame as to whose idea it had been to follow in Wainwright or indeed Julia Bradbury's footsteps. Now, it wasn't long before I had a queue of people waiting for tea and scones, the only thing that I could consistently bake zillions of without mishap. Ravensey was written about in guidebooks and shown on a television series called Wainwright's Walks, and it became a famous stop-off point exactly halfway on the 192-mile journey. Now, the relationship between the intrepid rambler and farmer has not always gone smoothly, but gradually, over time, we have learnt to love walkers. We've had lost walkers, bogged walkers, broken arms and legs, and even a dead walker. This was not only very sad, but quite embarrassing, as Clive's slight deafness meant that he did not twig the gravity of the situation when a tearful Swedish lady came into the farmyard to relay the bad news. At some point, her broken English, punctuated by stifled sobs and sniffing and vaguely pointing in the direction of the cow pasture, led Clive to believe that one of his herd of beloved cows had keeled over and died. Instead of summoning an ambulance, offering sympathy and uttering kind words of condolence, Clive set about cussing in a manner that only a beleaguered hill farmer can. "Bloody hell, they always go and die on bloody footpath, don't they? I'll go with load of tractor and get it shifted before anybody sees it." Fortunately, he did stop short of suggesting any kind of illegal on-farm burial. It was only when he took a walk to the field that he realised his mistake, for sure enough, there laid a rambler, complete with his rucksack, surrounded by a herd of cows looking at him with considerable interest. I should add that this poor man's demise was deemed of entirely natural causes and cannot in any way be attributed to the sampling of my home baking. Now, Ravenseat consists of just a farmhouse and gamekeeper's cottage, though its humble beginnings are thought to stem from the Viking times nearly 1,000 years ago, when Ravenseat was used as a place to summer cattle and sheep, and then vacated during the long, hard winter when the shepherds would have migrated to the kinder climes of the Eden Valley. Clues to its more recent past can be found in the many books and records that span the last 4 centuries. It's written of the Tanil pack ponies loaded with coal, coming through the farmyard, cutting across the common, and travelling onwards into Cumbria. Little has changed. What was an old Ingamite chapel is now the woodshed. Its pulpit remained until the turn of the last century, and though now gone, it still has its slitted arch windows, and you can see the steep pitch of the roof, which was once ling thatched. Ravensey has evolved over time, but its many barns, stells, and stone walls stand as testament to its past. Throughout the summer, we have an almost constant stream of visitors from all corners of the globe who come to marvel at the scenery and sometimes take a moment's rest to drink tea at our picnic benches. When the sun is shining, the hay meadows in flower, and the curlews calling overhead, there is no finer place on earth. But when the weather takes a turn for the worse, not only do the birds leave these bleak hills, but so too the tourists, and we are once again left to our own devices. It is these winter months that intrigue people the most. So what is it like during the winter? It's severely cold. There's nothing to shield us from the icy winds that come raging in from the west. The rain drives across the moor unrelentingly, and the sheep despise these conditions and will huddle at the back of the walls or in the gills. Far better for the weather to be still, cold and quiet. The sheep can handle this quite nicely, especially if being foddered small bales of the herbrich hay that we mew into the barns during the summer. Having said all this, the notion of being snowed in doesn't fill us with dread, quite the opposite. If your animals are safe and the dairy well stocked and the company is good, then it is not at all disconcerting to be put off. As time has gone on, the numbers in our menagerie have fluctuated somewhat. Children increased, cows and chickens increased, though the number of sheep remains relatively constant. For they are a huge flock, which means that they do not, in essence, belong to us. They belong to the farm and the open moor on which they graze. We merely tend them and act as their guardians. In order that we can do this, sheepdogs are an absolute essential tool for the job. Shepherding in the hills would be impossible without them. Never can they be replaced with a quad bike or even a drone, for much of the land is still only accessible on foot. We're happy to be very much reliant on the inbred wisdom and athleticism of the sheepdog, for a shepherd is nothing without a dog. I'm blessed to have at my side a devoted colleague that is keen to please and can outrun and outwit any fleecy fiend that cares to challenge authority. Now, Ravensey is a busy place at times, but the best thing about it is that it's a place of complete contrasts. I get the quiet and solitude of shepherding the sheep throughout the winter time, and the busy social aspect of meeting visitors from all corners of the globe throughout the summer months. Many of the people that pass through ask about the landscape, barns and sheep. Folk really do seem to be interested, as many have lost touch with the countryside, nature, and where their food comes from. But I'm still a little bit perplexed really as to what I'm doing here talking to you today, because I haven't really got any kind of message. I haven't got anything to preach. I suppose if anything, it's maybe about chasing a dream, fulfilling an ambition, however wildly unrealistic it might be, and above all, happiness. Not for 1 minute though, must you assume that Ravensey is some rural idyll. We have tough times like everyone else. Clive and I do not skip around holding hands at all times. But we do enjoy a good relationship, sharing duties on the farm and with the children. Our motto is that it doesn't matter who does the job, as long as it gets done. The boys can bake bread and cakes, just as Reuben can drive a tractor. Clive can change nappies and I can clip. I believe that this can-do attitude will serve the children well in whatever career paths they choose. A farming rural childhood gives them a sense of what's important: kindness, empathy, hard work, and of course, common sense. I regularly use Clive as a soundboard. When I write into the early hours, I will read back my efforts to him over breakfast, and he tells me what he thinks, and he doesn't mince his words. He tells it like it is. Regardless of where I go or what I do, my feet remain firmly grounded. Last year, I was invited to be a guest on midweek on Radio 4. One of the other guests was Reuben, the chef. Obviously, this required a trip to London, and my last job before I departed in the Land Rover was to give Clive specific instructions on how to tune the TV into the radio so that he could listen to me the next morning. Why the bloody hell would I want to tune in and listen to thee when I listen to you every day, he said. Since writing the books and appearing on the TV, various opportunities have come our way. Some have been welcome, others just downright odd. When a production company got in touch regarding a programme called Celebrity Sleepover, it took no thinking about whatsoever to decline the offer. I pictured some unlikely D-lister being our guest. I ignored Clive's protestations. But what if it's Joanna Lumley, he said with a wistful look in his eye. But I see our projects as just really a form of farm diversification. It's all just a way of propping up the business of hill farming. I take a camera with me wherever I go, taking snapshots of everyday life. Sometimes I'm behind the lens. Sometimes it's one of the children. Particularly through the long winter months, I get a bit more time to think and put pen to paper. Now, I've learned a lot over time that flashes of inspiration appear at the most inopportune of moments, that I must scribble things down as I think of them, for that turn of phrase that I reckon I couldn't possibly forget will have gone clean out of my mind by the time I return from the auction mart or come back into the farmyard. I could never have envisaged that the man in the tweed cape who sat on a plastic feed bag on the back of a quad bike whilst I drove through a blizzard to feed sheep would have ever seen a book in me. After our first encounter, he told me to write on a piece of A4 paper who I was, what I did, what I was going to write about, and who would want to read me. He would then meet me in London a week later. I sat with my literary agent in some seriously imposing offices and told the editors from 4 big publishing houses that I wanted to write him a book, that I had no previous writing experience, that I'd attained an E in English at GCSE level, but not to let that put them off. A week later, I had a book deal and a contract that asked me to produce 80,000 words in 6 months. It was a giant learning curve. Sometimes enjoyable, sometimes therapeutic, and occasionally maddening. But just imagine how surreal it feels to be in the thick of lambing time and to await the arrival of a friend every Sunday morning with a copy of the Times newspaper. Then, while supping coffee in the lambing pens, to scan the book chart and watch your own book moving up the bestsellers chart, eventually peaking at number 2. Then it's back to the business end of a sheep. So there you are. That's the truth of the matter. I'm just a very ordinary person who happens to live at an extraordinary place. And I just do what's always been done there. I raise a flock and a family. Now, isn't that long since that Reuben was tasked with doing a presentation project on careers? And as part of his research, he was told to interview people with different jobs. Mummy said, "What do you do?" Now that's a difficult question because I'm a Jill of all trades, master of none. "Well," I said, "I'm a shepherdess. That's what I do. I chase sheep about for a living. Folks have been shepherding sheep for many thousands of years, since biblical times, in fact." He went away happy, and I thought nothing more of it until the day of the school assembly. Sitting at the back, in my wellies, I wasn't entirely concentrating until I saw Reuben stand up and take to the stage. He'd done his research well and he spoke quite eloquently, though only when he got to what my parents do did he really have an impact on the hushed audience. "My mum," he said, "does the oldest profession in the world."
Brilliant.
Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed. That must have been the most random talk you guys have ever had, but there you go. Oh, I need a drink.
Amanda, and I'll let you have that drink. Absolutely fantastic and fascinating as well, because you know it just shows you the variations of your life. If you stop sharing, then you'll see me side by side with you, and I'll come and join you on the screen now. So let me just spotlight myself if I can. And
yeah.
There I am. I'm just seeing if I can spotlight myself.
I've got you, mate.
Oh, well done. Well done. That's
Yay!
hey,
Wow,
here we are. Here we go. I've come to keep you company. I've come to keep you company.
I'm overheating, to be fair. Honestly, I need to go and open the window.
Go for it.
Oh, there we are. Oh. Phew, there. Goodness me.
I know it's you know, one of the conversations we had yesterday where you really missed the contact that you get when you normally public speak, and I think as you said yesterday, it's a big thing that you miss, and this is great, obviously, but you do miss that tactile contact. What else?
I just love being able to see people's you can read. I have a back catalogue of saucy jokes and double entendres like you would not believe. But you know what? You have to read the audience and then you know whether it's going down well or not. And what is acceptable for Hampshire WI may not be acceptable for another. And the only way you can tell is by looking into the whites of their eyes.
Absolutely. One question, I've got loads of questions for you, which is really great. So the guys haven't let us down tonight, and I don't want to keep you on this all night because I'm sure you've got an early start in the morning. But how has the last year affected you guys from the running of the farm and the complications of COVID-19, and how have you had to adapt to that? Big question, probably, to start with.
Oh, it's a massive question. I mean, where do we even start? I mean, can you imagine the practicalities of having 9 children at home? I mean, every time I heard the fridge door go, I would literally have a bit of a meltdown. I mean, the toilet roll thing didn't bother me. There's plenty of dock leaves out there. It's back to basics here. We're not bothered about that. But I mean, if you can imagine all the frowns you get when people thought that you were kind of panic buying, can you imagine what my trolley looks like? I mean, you know, I would sort of go every 10 days to 2 weeks, I would head out to the supermarket to get supplies in. And, you know, it was really difficult because you couldn't buy X amount of stuff. So I thought to myself, right, we can beat this. We'll just become more self-sufficient. So I bought myself a cow. And then I didn't have to go and beg to buy 3-4 pints of milk. I got myself a cow instead. So now I milk the cow. So it's much easier. So it's just a question of kind of like problem solving. The thing I suppose that we miss the most, lockdown began at lambing time, and at lambing time, pretty much you're cut off from everything anyway. So, you know, we're back at that time again this year. But usually when lambing time ends, you say goodbye to your last sheep as it heads to the moor, and you say, hello, visitors, we're so pleased to see you and happy that you're, you know, that basically you've gone through 6 months of dealing with the sheep and being a shepherd. And then you morph into the sort of tourist guide, the tea maker. You know, I always call myself shepherdess, sherpa, and shoveler of, yeah, you know what. but yeah, I wear many hats. So the fact was, of course, the people didn't come back.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of, once upon a time, everybody said, oh, you've got to specialize. Whatever you do, specialize. Just do that. Just do it well. But actually, in a year like that, the last one, you know, you were no good being reliant on tourism because there wasn't any. So you fall back on other things. In a roundabout kind of way, the situation worked in our favor because it took a lot of people, you know, that last year to realize what they had in front of them and how much they craved getting out and into the countryside. And the only access they had was either through a book in their hand or through the television set. So ridiculous kind of roundabout kind of a manner. If you can imagine this time last year, I'm running about filming my own episode of our Yorkshire farm with a phone and goodness knows what GoPros and all the other bits and pieces. And then literally it heads off to London, gets edited, chopped up and made decent. And it goes out and I think 3.6 million people watch that altogether. And that is just me running about the farm, doing what I do, bribing and threatening the kids to talk to the camera, you know, and making a program. So it was a question of, could you adapt? Yeah. I think that was it. It's been horrible. It has affected us massively. It's kind of like an isolation on top of an isolation. For a lot of people say, well, nothing has changed. And in a way, it hadn't. But in another way, it enormously had. It felt pretty much like back in the year 2001 with the foot and mouth, when you have less contact. I mean, the connections are massive that you didn't have that 20 years ago, you know, with the internet and all the rest of it, but it still has its limitations. it's basic things that you miss, the human contact, isn't it? All that stuff, you know.
I've got to ask this next question because so many people have asked this. And is Reuben still at university? And how has she got on? I mean, I must have 10 people asking this, so and more. So she's very popular.
She is. She's coming back tomorrow. She, because her course is relies on a lot of work in labs and practicalities. I mean, as she said, Mum, I'm going to have to go back in because I need to do practical work. I mean, who would trust a medical person coming along with a rubber glove and saying, hey, don't worry, guys, I learned how to do this online. It's not happening, is it? You know what I mean? So we get her back in the lab, and that's what she's doing at the moment. She'll be back home for Easter, and then she'll head off again. So she is doing great. She's in her second year. I think she's talking about going on and doing her masters. I don't know what a bedside manner's like. Personally, I think it's rubbish. She'd probably be really good on a war field or something like that where there was no anesthesia. But there you go. She's been brought up on a farm. You kind of get to see it all in front of you. Life, death, and that other bit in the middle, the birds and the bees. They know it all. So, and Reuben's got his apprenticeship. He's working with plant machinery. And I believe, I don't know what time it is, that he's been on the TV tonight under his own steam, mending a tractor with the lads from Cannon Hall. I don't know. I had nothing to do with it. Because the one thing that I can give those kids is a sense of independence. In other words, I can't hover over them. You can't hover over 9 of them and do everything for them. So basically, they have to do their own ducking and diving and bobbing and weaving and make their own deals and goodness knows what. So yeah, he was away filming. He's done some TV. I think he's on next week. But basically, I've missed him. All I know is that he nicked me coat to do it. So there you go.
One question that's come up here. Do you think your children will write a book about living on the farm from their perspective?
Oh, that'd be good, wouldn't it?
Here's an idea for you.
Yeah. Well, can you think of all the puns you could have, like sort of don't pull the wool over my eyes, that kind of thing. Yeah, there'd be all kinds. Again, there's no stopping them. They have opportunities. Good. And whether they take those opportunities is up to them. You know, Raven's modelled for Burberry. And I mean, that was great. She got to model for Burberry. I mean, she didn't want to model for Burberry. She's like, I like Primark. I was like, Burberry, it's a top name. And Clive was like, Bilberry, I've never heard of them. I was like, Burberry, you're losing all my street cred here. It's all about what opportunities come your way and whether you want to take them. Edith did some stuff, news round, some little roving reporter stuff. I don't know. But it just depends on whether you see it as sort of a big weight on your shoulders or just an opportunity to do things. And they all have choices. The cameras come in. If they're on screen, it's because they want to be. And if it's not, it's because they don't want to be. There's no choreography. They're coming to film tomorrow. They'll be here for the next 3 days. I don't know what's going to happen. Something could die. As long as it's something outside and not something at this side at farm door, they'll be fine. You know, I don't know where the story ends. I don't know where it takes them. And I guess that must be why it's popular, because that is most people's lives. Most people's lives, you know, aren't that glamorized, Hollywoody style, perspex table, minimalist, this, everything dressed perfect. I mean, you want to see my house. I mean, I've tried to make it look nice. What's behind me?
It looks very cozy. I'm going to ask you a few more questions.
Go for it.
Go for it. Right. Okay. So what is your favorite season? I think I know, but go on. The guys want to know, what's your favorite season of the year?
June.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm supposed to say lambing time because it's bringing new life into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, we're on pet lamb number 1. When we're on pet lamb number 46, it'll be getting a bit tedious. Basically, you get through lambing time, and because lambing time for us is late, it is summer when we finish lambing. So that's great. You just go straight into summertime. And then June, you've turned all your sheep away back to the moor. The hay meadows are starting to grow. Everything's coming to life. It's finally stopped snowing, because the winters are so long here and summers are so short, and it's always got a sting in its tail. You think that spring is here, and it never is. You know, the birds are back and all the rest of it, and it will snow on us. So June, because all the sheep go back to the moor, the cows go out of the barn and they head away to the allotments, things start growing, and for about a fortnight, there's kind of nothing to do-ish. I mean, there's loads to do, really, but there kind of isn't anything pressing. It's too early to clip the sheep. It's too early to make any hay. So there's just a 2-week sort of lull. So I love June. There you go.
So another question: what is Clive's nickname for Reuben? Alan heard it on the TV, but he's forgotten it, and it made him smile.
Rhubarb, Pooban, and some quite unmentionable ones, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, honestly, I forget the names. I've become my grandmother. I just run through all the names like Reverend, Reuben, Miles, Edith, Alan, and then I start going through the Sydney, and it just becomes on. And that's quite responsive. Oh, they're even quite responsive to a whistle, you see. If I give a whistle, I mean, they don't respond, like they don't go right and left. But
here's a statement from Helen. You are indeed a superwoman, and she and I am indeed starstruck. There we are. Starstruck, I should say.
That's nice. Don't be, honestly. I'm no domestic goddess. All it is I prioritize things. I decide what's important and hang the rest of it, if you see what I mean. You know.
This is from Steve. I'm from the Lakes and know a number of sheep farmers. You've certainly raised the profile of sheep farming in the Dales. Do you ever see yourself becoming a national ambassador for the challenges faced by sheep farmers in the UK? You would be brilliant.
Oh, I don't know. I do all kinds of things behind the scene. I am actually going for the second time down to the Home Office to do some talking and telling them what's what. But basically, I do feel like at this very moment, people do get a bit fed up of people standing up on soapboxes going, yeah. And I do my thing, and I like to do my thing. And I don't know, there's so many messages out there. I prefer to show people by showing them. I mean, as a writer, I suppose you shouldn't say that a picture can tell 1,000 words, but that is the truth of it. You can stand there and tell people till the cows come home, this is how we farm. We're nature friendly. This is what it's about. We're not using pesticides. We're not using fertilizers. Look at the hay meadows. How beautiful is this? Look, we're farming extensively. Look at all this space. Look how gorgeous it is. I can say that, and it's in one ear and out the other. So the best way that you can get into people's minds is to show them. And then they get to actually see it unfold in front of their very eyes. So the message I think gets out there and gets across to people, albeit maybe not in a preachy manner. It's like when people say, oh, you should write a parenting manual. Oh my God, are you kidding? I mean, pretty much the kids have become who they are and what they are by my own laziness. What's for dinner, Mom? I don't know. What are you making? In other words, you get good at stuff, don't you? So there you go. I mean, I just do my thing and I have no sort of delusions of grandeur. And another thing, I don't have the time to sit down and do the working out. I'm an expert in my field, but it's a green and grassy one. I can't give you percentages. I can only tell you whether I'm happy or sad. People might ask me all kinds of complicated things and I'd be just like, what? You know, overcomplicate things. I love what I do. I believe that we're doing a great job and I like to showcase what we're doing. And for whatever reason, I feel like it's working. So there you go.
Well, I do, and I've got one question I'm going to ask you myself. Who's the person that's most inspired you in your life and why?
Do you know what I'm going to say?
Go on.
I don't know, you see. I don't know the sort of general age. Is the general age 41 or is it just 41 club? I don't know.
It's 41 club, so the general age is going to be a mixture, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Right, so if I say Hannah Hawkswell, do people know who I'm talking about?
Sorry, say again.
Hannah Hawkswell.
Yes.
I don't know. Do you remember her? There's a whole generation that actually doesn't know anything about Hannah Hawkswell, but she was the first woman of the Dales, the first lady of the Dales, discovered farming alone, with just the basics, no water, no electricity, all the rest of it. And she in a way, I think it was the way she was living that life, but she let the cameras in. She was really a pioneer of the fly on the wall documentary because she wasn't closed down to the idea of going global. She went everywhere and I got to know her. I got to know her and I went and sat with her and she was a feisty old bird. She really was. There was far more to her than meets the eye. I said to her, one day, nearing the end of her life, she had to go into old folks' home because she tripped over things, because she hoarded things. Anyway, I said to her, if you could go back anywhere, Hannah, where would you want to go? Thinking she was going to say, oh, I'd love to go back to the firm low-back Burke hat. And she thought about it for a bit and she went, oh, Vienna with my class ball. So there you go, you see. She was quite unpredictable, really. But she for me, she was tough, she was hard, she spoke really eloquently, she had good skin, she was great.
And I think that's exactly the line I'd use about you tonight. You've been fantastic. Well, on that note, and I think we've asked you enough questions, and I want you to make sure you have a cup of tea or whatever you're drinking there. I hope it's a bit stronger. I want to just pass over to Peter now, and he'll do a quick introduction so we can give a real note of thanks to you for this evening. So let me just hand over. Peter, are you there, my friend?
Yeah, I'm here.
Let us get you me off the spotlight and get you on there.
Okay.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks a lot. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm going down over to another lady now. I told them all about you getting glammed up doing nails while we were talking earlier. Now we've got another lady coming on, the incoming president of Tangent, Tracy Pickin. Are you there, Tracy?
I am, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hi, hi.
She's all glammed up as well. She sold the caravan and kept the curtains.
Indeed.
Right. I'll hand it over to you then, Tracy. Thanks very much.
Amanda, thank you. Thank you for a fascinating and lovely evening. I don't know where the time has gone. You are proof that not all superheroes wear capes. This one, far more glamorous, and most likely to be found modelling green wellies or in a lay-by. So, Hill Shepherdess, farmer, author, photographer, and as we've learned tonight, a talented public speaker and journalist, not to mention wife and mother of 9 and wrestler. I'm exhausted just listing your talents, let alone living your life. And I'm reminded of a book that I read years ago, and I bet lots of people read. I don't know how she does it. And I think that that's how you have left most of us feeling tonight. You're very modest, but I really don't know how you do it. You lead a fascinating and extremely busy life. And on the surface, it, like you said, idyllic, but I'm guessing that it's much tougher than you've let on tonight. Thank you for sharing it with us. And along with those beautiful, beautiful photos, we've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you a little bit through your lovely storytelling. Thank you, Amanda. And can I ask everyone to show your thanks to Amanda however you can on Zoom? And just while I've got you, can I also add a quick thank you to Peter, Marcus, Don and Glenn for everything they've done tonight and for including Tangent. Thanks.
Always a pleasure, Tracy.
Welcome.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Tracy.
Amanda and Tracy, thank you for absolutely a great note of thanks. Amanda, it's been one of my most enjoyable, call it interviews, with an individual coming from West Wales, coming from the farming background as well, and understanding the Brecon Beacons and all the weather that you deal with. It certainly brought me back home a little bit tonight, so thank you for that. And I would now just say a final thanks before I open up to anybody else. But I'm going to say to you, you've made a huge difference to over 458 people on here tonight. And thank you for doing that, because it means a lot to us. Thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you for inviting me, guys. It's been a great evening. It's lovely.
Okay, and on that note, should we unmute everybody?
Yeah.
And everybody can unmute themselves now, and they can absolutely raise the roof. Plenty of claps. And Amanda, thank you.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
He enjoys all to top up the fire.
Thank you very much.
I am on mute. Yeah. Okay.
Where's Clive hiding?
Okay.
Very good.
It was lovely, wasn't it? I did enjoy that. Absolutely fantastic.
I'll leave it now.
Lovely.